Good afternoon. Nayaswami Hriman here on a spectacularly sunny, glorious day here on Camino Island at the Camino Hermitage, overlooking Port Susan Bay and at the beautiful but volcanic Mount Baker covered in snow. Okay, today's stanza is 35. And I'll read it first, and then we'll have Swami Kriyananda sing it. This is, for me, thus far, the most the least obvious understanding or clarity with respect to Omar's stanzas. This takes a lot of intuition, but fortunately we have Paramahansa Yogananda's commentary to elucidate us. Okay, so here's how it reads. I think the vessel that with fugitive articulation answered once did live and merry make. And the cold lip I kissed, how many kisses might it take and give? Well, here we go. Let's listen to what Swami Kriyananda has to say about this.
Stanza 35. I think the vessel, stanza 35. I think the vessel that with fugitive articulation answered once did live and merry make, and the cold lip I kissed, how many kisses might it take and give. Paraphrase. In ecstasy on seeing my body entranced in death-like immobility, I posed questions to it. My body-conscious ego, conversing in the universal language of intuition, responded freely concerning its past lives and experiences. Once, long ago, it told me, it had been aware of itself as the true and perfect image of spirit. Thus it had lived a godly life on earth. Later it fell under delusion's sway, and thereafter reveled in the trivial pleasures of the senses. I then tried, as if by kissing my bodily form, to instill divine perceptions into its submerged awareness, to embrace that part of my subconscious, in other words, which still identified itself with material life and lacked the warmth of spiritual wisdom. By repeated exchanges of divine love and joy, I sought to inspire my lingering material self with the desire to be born anew in the Spirit.
This is a most curious quatrain, not just as a quatrain, but even for the message that Yogananda Ji gives to us in explanation. He is, there are several points, he is reaffirming, really, the ancient and universal teaching in different forms and stories throughout the world, that there was a time of creation that we were pure and innocent and attuned to the divine presence and will, and that by making choices, we fell from a high state of consciousness into worldly consciousness and incurred the kind of karma that brings us back lifetime after lifetime. But even more particularly is this idea that in ecstasy, on seeing my body entranced in death-like immobility, I posed questions to it. I don't recall clearly, but the very first words of the Revelation of St. John, the last book of the Bible, says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And there's some phrasing right there in the first couple of stanzas that make it clear that he too was in, his body was in a death-like immobile trance. There are different levels of trance, including unconscious trance states. So here when Yogananda uses that term, trance, and as I am using it therefore here also, he's speaking about a state of superconsciousness. Is it Sabikalpa Samadhi for those of you who are devotees of the Patanjali and the yogic path? He doesn't actually say that here. And I'm not entirely certain that it is therefore Sabikalpa Samadhi. But no matter, it could be a high state of superconsciousness, because after all, on the fifth stage of the Eightfold Path to Awakening, Pratyahara here at the throat center where I'm pointing, is when we transcend the senses. And that at least implies moving in the direction of a trance-like, immobile bodily position, a body of bodily fixation. So in any case, however, in this state of consciousness, it is not death. In fact, one is vibrantly aware. Curiously, however else you might define this state, he says, my body-conscious ego. This is why I'm not certain, in fact, I don't think it's Sabikalpa Samadhi. My body-conscious ego, conversing in the universal language of intuition, responded freely. You see, the subconscious mind is the reservoir of memory of all the past lives, a lot of things, even in the current life, but all of our past lives are stored in the reservoir of the subconscious mind. And as the adept, as the spiritual aspirant acquires increasing non-attachment to the current body, the current personality, the current lifetime, Patanjali says that the siddhi, or the power of recollecting past lives, begins to arise. And this too makes a great deal of sense. And so he says, my body-conscious ego. Yogananda defined the ego as the soul to the extent identified with the body and its personality. And so the subconscious mind is generally, in most people, until they are fully awakened and liberated, identified with the body. And so there is this exchange, this wordless exchange of smriti, recollection. Once long ago, it told me, it had been aware of itself, and so he goes to remark upon his original innocence and God consciousness. Then here's another curious aspect. I then tried, as if by kissing my bodily form. What a curious expression, to instill divine perceptions into its submerged awareness. On the spiritual path, through mantra and japa, through prayer, meditation, service to God through others, through all the spiritual actions of the path, universally speaking, we are at the same time kissing, infusing the subconscious reservoir with divine perceptions, awakened perceptions of our greater reality, our original innocence, our greater reality as a soul. And so, because the subconscious sucks in, takes in, absorbs all that goes through the senses and our mind and consciousness, when we live a more conscious, uplifted spiritual life, all of these spiritual perceptions, intentions, and actions and feelings get absorbed by the subconscious mind. It's as if we're kissing the sub. It's just such a strange way of putting it. By repeated exchanges of divine love and joy, I sought to inspire my lingering material self with the desire to be born anew in spirit. Isn't that amazing? Now, Swami Kriyananda added at the end of this an interesting couple of paragraphs that he calls applied outwardly. He says the soul, while it still lives on earth, has a sacred duty to inspire hope and courage in others. And this is, Yogananda repeated or reaffirmed the teaching from India that in order to achieve our final liberation, we ourselves must help other people. He, in fact, used the number 6. God knows why 6 other people. I trust that by the time we achieve moksha liberation, we've inspired a great many more than just 6 people, but in any case. So we can't achieve oneness with all creation and with God beyond creation by ignoring other people. In fact, Yogananda stated the precept that we cannot achieve the love of God unless we achieve the perfect love of at least one other human being. Again, these are very strange and difficult to really understand, beyond the words, to understand the reality, the level of realization that he's speaking of. How do we free 6 other people? How do we achieve perfect love of at least one other person? Well, in any case, what Kriyananda has added to this, which is otherwise speaking of a deep state of superconsciousness, he's trying to make it more practical, in other words, by reminding us, encouraging us, even imposing upon us the obligation not just to seek God for ourselves in deep states of ecstasy and superconsciousness, but that we too, as we grow spiritually, should see for ourselves the value and responsibility of helping other people, to sharing the wisdom, the way of life, the inspiration, and the joy of seeking God. In our weekly Festival of Light it says, and whereas in the past the coin of man's redemption, the coin of our soul's liberation, in other words, whereas in the past the coin of man's redemption was made in the payment of sorrow and suffering. I think of Jesus on the cross and the emphasis on the cross down through Christianity. And in the East, in India, the emphasis upon tapasya, on ascetical practices. The coin of man's redemption has for us now been exchanged for calm acceptance and joy. Self-discipline will always be a part of success, even material success. It remains, therefore, a part of spiritual success. But what has been exchanged for us in this era, in this age, is the greater understanding that it's the ego that suffers, at least to the extent it resists living a godly life, a spiritual life, a life of harmony. It's the ego that suffers, and that to the extent we live by truth, we gain in happiness, we gain in joy. Living for God is the sorrow, is the funeral of our sufferings. After all, did not Lord Buddha seek the riddle to how to end suffering? Isn't that what we're talking about? And so the emphasis in the past that we've inherited, most of us in the Christian era, of the emphasis on, carrying our cross, which we do anyway. Life is full of crosses, is no longer an inspiration to us. It's no longer the truth that we perceive. We are ready to perceive the truth that by right diet, right exercise, right living, unselfish behavior, positive attitudes, these are all of the ego, but nonetheless, they bring us greater contentment, greater fulfillment, greater even material success in the world around us. If you catch more flies by honey than by vinegar. So if we treat people with respect and treat ourselves with respect, then we will achieve greater success on every possible level. So that's what Kriyananda, he is speaking. If you read the book, and I hope you will, talks more about sharing the spiritual life, the spiritual lifestyle and attitudes with people more openly, not as a proselytizer, but not to be shy about these things. O divine souls, help others to see that no matter how weak or negative they feel, at their inner center they are forever powerful, made as they are, as we are, in the image of God. And so, one message of this reading would be, and I'm not going to dwell on it because my time is up, is the power of concentration to enter deep states such as Omar is speaking of. But that's perhaps for another time. Okay, so kiss that subconscious body with kisses of divine love. Awaken that sleeping soul that lies deep within us. Joy to you, and we'll see you soon. Okay, off we go.